Welcome back to the latest edition of the Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Elyachar, the chief content producer and writer of jakestake.com, a pop culture entertainment news website. Today, I'm so excited because on today's podcast, we have a singer-songwriter who's actually a Recording Academy voting member. She has over 4,000 Instagram followers, 5,000 Facebook fans, and as of this recording, 25,600 Twitter followers. So please help me welcome Natalie Nicole Gilbert.
Hello, how are you? It's so good to see you, Jacob.
It's so good to see you too, Natalie. Thank you so much for bringing the California sun to us.
Trying to pump in as much of that warmth as I can. I know for many other people, it's quite cold this time of year. Here, it has been a ridiculous 90 degrees Fahrenheit this week. So I'm happy if you can send me some of your cold, that would be much appreciated.
I'll do my best, but I think I can't airmail some masks to you, but I'll do my best.
Very good.
All right, let's get started. So when did you get interested in music, and how did that passion evolve into the desire to pursue a career in the recording industry?
I was really fortunate that I grew up in a very musical family. We were not quite the Partridge Family, but that's not a far cry from what we were. I would perform with my sister and my mother. So there was a lot of harmonies, a rich vocal blending. My mother is a professional pianist, and her caliber was far and beyond. I always feel what I could do because she played with Liberace. So all my life I've had that as the bar that I have to reach toward, which is a wonderful bar to reach for. But because of that, she exposed me to music of all kinds growing up. I heard everything from, Gershwin and Schubert to the latest pop hits that she was playing for friends' weddings, and Disney hits that she was learning because she also played for dance recitals and things like that. She played for every event you can think of under the sun, including Muhammad Ali's birthday at one point, one of his birthday parties. So that was always one of her gleeful things that she would point to, and she would talk about how he signed her sheet music and stuff like that. So that's kind of the environment that I grew up in, where music was really a part of life. It was a soundtrack of life because people were bringing her into these events, not only for concerts that she was classically trained for. She had a master's in music, but also these life events, weddings, funerals, parties, birthday parties. So there was always kind of this linkage between music at a meaningful moment in your life and music of all these genres. There was no genre limitation. And, from what I've bumped into with my collaborators and heard from other musicians who were sometimes sort of landlocked in a genre, I've become aware in a way that I don't think I understood as a kid, that that's not a customary upbringing, that a lot of people are only exposed to just country or just pop or all of these things. So I'm really blessed that I had that wide gamut of being exposed to so many different kinds of music. So I think it was impossible for me not to have a passion for music.
And it's incredible passion too. And also, by the way, you're the first to name drop both Liberace and Muhammad Ali on at the same time. So I am two icons when it comes to pop culture and both the its importance to American culture.
Truly, truly. And I mean, my mom, one of the things that I'm so grateful that she instilled in me too, is that in spite of her playing at that level and being that caliber, she was always humble. She always saw everyone as a person. It wasn't just a name, even if she was like, "Will you sign my sheet music?" She still treated everyone as if they were anybody. She treated everyone equally. And I'm so grateful that she also instilled that understanding that, you shouldn't bring your diva attitude to anything,
Diva or Devo?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
All righty. So can you describe your songwriting style to my audience, please?
Yeah, because I do come from many different genres, there are times when I like to start with the music. I do play piano and guitar myself. I do not consider myself a piano player at my mother's level, though I certainly try. I'm much more of a songwriting pianist, that more like playing chords, not the long arpeggios and, beautiful classical sort of playing that she did, though I love that stuff. And that certainly does still infiltrate. There are some songs that I write that have like classical rondo styles, which you don't hear a lot of in pop music. But I think a lot of my songwriting starts from that basic stripped down acoustic singer-songwriter space. And then once I take it into the studio, whether I started with music first or lyrics first, then we really build in some of those electronic and sort of almost film score components that give it a really ethereal sort of texture. So it is great music for driving, for, backdrop stuff. I take no offense, if some of the people who've added me to their playlist, they're like, this is my playlist to help people sleep. And I'm not the least bit offended by that, because to me, it tells me that it's calming. And again, it's like one of those life moments, because we need music for every element of our lives, all the more during the pandemic. So I'm always thinking of that end user element of music, not just what I feel when I write, but who's going to be on the receiving end of this, and what do I need to say to them, or how can I comfort them, or what do they need to take away from this music? So that's part of my songwriting process.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because music is for all occasions, no matter happy, sad, and uplifting, spiritual, or just to soothe the calming soul after like a major tragedy or something like that. But
Yeah.
like, speaking of music, I want to talk to you about Warm Weather. So while I was doing my research for the podcast, I noticed that this was your first record in 8 years. So why did you decide to release Warm Weather now?
Warm Winter, really, it's oddly enough, I was working on 3 other albums, which are due out this year, have not been released yet. We've released a few teaser singles from them last summer. But while we were working on those, and I saw the caliber of people that I had working on those projects, especially the string player who's been doing the violins, viola, and bringing in a cello player for Warm Winter and some of the other songs, I said, we should take the time to just work on a Christmas single or something. As long as we all have the time, COVID meant that some of them that would normally be performing with symphonies or doing concerts didn't have those avenues right now, and had a little more free time than they normally would. So I came to them very kindly saying, would you have time for even one Christmas song, if you have time? And it really began as just, well, maybe we have time for one single. And then it was, well, maybe a little EP with 2 or 3 songs. And then by the end of it, as you know, it became a 10-track project. And I crafted it really selecting those songs, wanting to pick songs that weren't strictly holiday songs. Although, certainly I don't hold anything against anyone if they choose to listen to Christmas music all year long, especially during a season like this where we're stuck at home. We need that joy. But I also wanted to choose songs that were really real and that were just about winter generally, or a seasonal change in life generally. So some of those songs that I picked, and I saw your list of some of the songs that you like from the project. A lot of those songs that you like are those songs that are kind of timeless, and they are not strictly assigned to listening between like November 25th and December 25th, which is great.
Agreed, and that's the reason why I wanted to put this, because even though the half of that track is where I already put them behind them, the 5 that I picked out are really strong tracks. And let's start with Falling, because when I first listened to the beginning, I thought it was a Jewel track immediately.
Oh, wow.
Written for Jewel, like seriously.
Cool. That's a great comparison. I don't know if I've heard that one or heard it in a while, but that's wonderful. Yeah, I really felt like that one, as soon as I heard it, as a songwriter myself, there were elements of it that I was like, oh, this is the kind of song I would have written myself. A lot of the piano sounds like the kind of piano playing I do. So I immediately kind of resonated with Harry Styles' work on that song. And then, there was a little bit of a synth tone in his version, if you know the original version. But I felt like it didn't have some of those lush strings that could be there. And then as we were building that track, originally we had it with piano at the beginning, like his version. But when I heard the string stems come back, when I heard the first samples of the demos of the strings, I said, this needs to open with just the strings. Those are so lush and so beautiful. I don't want to sing over them. I want to take the piano away. I just want to hear those strings because they're so beautiful. And I think they make that recording of that song.
I totally agree. And this is the first that I've thought that song was Harry Styles. I thought this was Jewel, but like, wow.
Yeah, it's really beautiful work. And I love his version. I do not look down on his version at all, but I wanted to bring something different to it, bring something a little more calming to it even, because I think his version is more heart-wrenching and mine is a little more pensive. But I love his version too.
No offense. I prefer your version over to his version.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right. Speaking of another classic song, how about Vincent's Starry, Starry Night? That was a beautiful rendition.
Oh, that was so fun. And I'm a lover of Vincent's work. All of his paintings, so gorgeous. I had the opportunity before COVID began, really shortly before, technically when COVID was already going on in Asia. I was in France, in Paris, and at that time they had an exhibition at Les Lumières, at l'Atelier de Lumière, which I'm probably saying a little bit wrong, but American accent. Uh, but they had this beautiful exhibition, a light show, like 2-story light show in essentially an abandoned warehouse, where they projected all of his artwork animated on the wall. Against a backdrop of music and everything, like 40 minutes of just Vincent van Gogh's artwork all over the place. So you were immersed in it. And we had already recorded some of that song before I had seen the light show, but then after it, I went back and revamped some of it and added in the strings, I believe. And it just meant so much to learn more about his life. I also had a chance to read the letters that his sister-in-law published that he and his brother had written back and forth before he passed, and kind of studied up on a little bit of his life that's publicly known and what happened before he passed. So as I sang it, I definitely wanted to give it some of that knowledge of who he was, and a tribute to his artwork, not just, a tribute to the original song by Don McLean, but also just kind of celebrating this misunderstood artist who in so many ways is obviously a tragic figure. But I think if he had lived even 50 years later, or even 100 years later, he just would have had such a different life experience. People would have been able to meet him where he was at and support him better. And it's so important to kind of reflect on that and look at ways that we can improve some of those things too.
I totally agree. I think Vincent van Gogh would definitely be I think a lot with today's mental health, I think a lot more people would appreciate his work.
Truly. And when you realize that he didn't sell a single painting really during his lifetime, and now they're worth so many millions of dollars, you sort of realize what he missed out on. He could have been celebrated during his lifetime and then might not have met the fate that he did.
Absolutely. But let's turn on to a very classic, because the thing is, Joni Mitchell's River is a timeless classic. And it's probably one of the greatest songs of all time, no matter what generation you're in for music. It's a beautiful version of that song. And it's almost, your version is that, like, there's so many covers of the song, but like there are 2 covers I really love. Besides your version and also CeeLo Green's version of that song.
Oh, yes. I love CeeLo's version of that song. In fact, that might have been one of the things that first really put it on my radar before I'd even gotten to thoroughly know Joni's version. Though my collaborator who worked with me on that one and did the arrangement on the piano is a big Joni Mitchell fan. And as soon as I started entertaining the idea of touching that song, I knew I had to toss it to him, because Dana Bizignano, my collaborator and song co-writer, we've also written a lot of songs originally together. I knew he would give it all its just desserts and honor Joni's work to make sure the integrity of her writing was intact. But I also, the thing I really love about that song, a bit like Vincent as well, is that, when you think of a holiday album or even a winter album, you think of these really peppy, upbeat, happy, almost plastic songs that are a little bit fake around the edges, but we're okay with it being fake because we can all reach for that happiness and hope and joy during the holiday season. But I love that Joni especially wrote the song acknowledging, hey, it's the holiday season, people are putting up trees and reindeer, but she was not feeling it. She was in the midst of a breakup. She was in a peculiar place in her career. She was at a time of transition, as all of us are right now. Even if, I have friends who've lost their jobs during COVID. have friends who've maintained them, and friends who've gotten a promotion during this window of time. But whatever your status, all of us are facing these events together and having our lives interrupted and delayed and postponed. And I felt like her song spoke to that best, that moment of, I'm supposed to be joyful. Everybody around me is kind of going through the motions of this traditional happy time, but I am choosing to sit back and just reflect on my life and what's going on right now instead.
I totally agree. And also another reflection song is Paisu. And was this Andrew Lloyd Webber's version that you were covering?
Yes. And his version is from a more contemporary pop opera in the 90s. And it is actually thought of as a holiday sort of song, although it's technically written by him as a funeral hymn. But it's just kind of a timeless hymn in and of itself. I mean, you could sing it for any sort of sacred event or any kind of soundtrack score sort of thing. And it was not my first foray into singing foreign songs. I have sung in French previously, but I think I can realistically say this was my first time singing in Latin. So it was, I definitely went into it going, I might really blow this and I might decide not to put it on the album. But in the end, I threw it to my collaborator, Andrew Jocelyn, who did all the string arrangements. And I brought it to him saying, I know this could be done on piano. It was originally done on synth in Andrew Lloyd Webber's version. But I think it could be entirely instrumentally carried on strings, having heard his work on my other tracks like Vincent. And I said, if you're up for it, then I'm up for it. And when he sent back his track for me to sing over, I was so elated that worked out the way that it did. And really, how it turned out blew me away, because I really didn't know, especially in the limited amount of time that we had to cultivate it and really polish it the way that we traditionally do, if we would have the time to give it the fullness that it deserved. But I'm so pleased with the end result.
All right, the final track we got to talk about. I love the track so much. I put it on my Jake's Take New Music Reviews Artists to Watch. It was Landslide. I got to say, you really did Stevie Nicks proud with that song. It was so impeccable.
Thank you. And when I heard the first takes back as my producer comped those vocals, I almost didn't recognize my voice on that, because I think it was when we had some wildfires here in LA that we had recorded that, and I'd been taking some Benadryl for allergies and such. So I felt like my voice just sounded so dry and raspy, but that, being that it's a Stevie Nicks song, was kind of the perfect way to pay tribute to her as well, to just bring that raspiness and sort of dry throatedness to it. And being that it's sort of an emotional and reflective song, I think if it had been any other song and I hadn't been covering the artist that I was, I might have said, let's redo that. It doesn't sound like me. But when I heard it, I was like, wow, this kind of sounds like Stevie, and not in like a mimicking sort of way, but like kind of like what you're saying. I did feel like it did it justice, and I really wanted to do it justice, because I know there are other versions out there, but it's such a touching song. And I think, as we've talked about, some of the other tracks are kind of made to be pensive. It's a pensive year for all of us. It's a year where all of us have been, we've had this pause button hit on our lives, whether we wanted it to be hit or not. And it's forcing us to go, are we on track? Are we where we want to be? Are we responding to the environment around us the way that we want to? And I feel like that is really the heart and soul of that song that she wrote too, that it's just like, these are the decisions I'm making, and I know I'm getting older and the people around me are getting older. But this is how I'm choosing to live this time. And it's so definitive and so decisive.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you on that. And now you mentioned a couple of your collaborators that throughout our conversation of Warm Winter. However, do you have any dream collaborators like that, the bucket list collaborators, singers, songwriters, producers, and how would they enhance your sound, Natalie?
Yes. One for me, and this may be a funny one, but I would just love to work with Peter Cetera from Chicago, and an individual artist in his own right as well. Growing up, I heard some of his ballads, and I think he's just a wonderful, powerful ballad performer and songwriter. I know there'd be a big age difference there, and I think he's still singing these days. I think I would be catching him before he's officially retired. I don't know, but just hearing some of his power hits, especially from soundtracks over the years, I think he would be wonderful. And I don't know if I should tell you the name, but I will say I just got an email this morning. I took the time to reach out to one of my dream songwriters. In fact, maybe you put this in my mind, because I had read, a preview of your questions before our interview today. And I just thought, now that I've got this latest album under my belt, maybe I should just ping this songwriter's publisher and let them know I'm up for a collaboration in the off chance they'd like to. And to me, this person is a fantastic piano-based songwriter. I listened to his songs as a teenager. I probably had his poster on my wall because we played him at one of the radio stations I worked for in my early teens. And I actually got an email back from them this morning saying he would like to write with me. But I don't want to jinx it by telling you who he is yet.
Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. I'm sending positive vibes, fingers crossed.
Thank you so much. I would be, and if knock on the wood around me, if everything goes to plan.
I'm knocking wood on my kitchen table in my apartment as well.
Thank you. If that collaboration does happen, I promise you, I will send you the resulting MP3 demos first ahead of anybody else because I had a chance to mention it first with you. So,
well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
After our interview, I'll send you a link to who it is, just so you know. But to me, it would be mind-blowing to work with this person.
All right. I'm very excited about that. But in addition to music, you're also a talented voiceover artist because you recorded stuff for McDonald's, for Cadillac, for Quizno, and even the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So when did you get interested in voiceovers? And what have been some of your most memorable recordings?
Oddly enough, we all have those odd hobbies as children, and doing voiceovers was my childhood hobby. And I know this sounds really bizarre, but I grew up in an era before cell phones where we had sometimes if you were a teenager and you received a lot of calls, you would have your own dedicated landline as a teenager. So I had my own voicemail from probably the age of 14 or 15. And instead of just letting that be like, hey, you've reached Natalie, I'll call you back when I can, leave your number, I would take the time to read like today's devotional, here's today's happy thought, or whatever, my friends would call sometimes just to hear the voicemail because I would update it so regularly. I was like the happy peppy, inspirational phone line. Made no money for it, of course, but was just I would write my own scripts and deliver it. And by that time, to be fair, I had also been in modeling school, and part of that and theater training, and both of those things offer me a little bit of like diction training and to focus on enunciation and making sure that you didn't have a big accent from any place that you lived or anything, more of a standard American dialect the way they trained us. So I did at least already have a little bit of that training, technically, formally. But it was also, when I stepped into radio, it was a little bit of what I just did with that email to the songwriter this week. I reached out to a radio station. I was, I think, 18, maybe 19. And I just said, I'm still in college, but I would love to work for you part-time if, and I was thinking maybe an internship behind the scenes, but as it happened, they had just lost somebody on the air recently and needed somebody who was willing to work weekends. And because it was, I think, affiliated with a church, they didn't have a lot of people who were willing to work on Sundays. So they hired me. And to this day, I keep in touch with my boss there, and it was such a great experience. Once I was on the air, people would call the station to hire me to do a commercial for them because my voice was out there, and I had that experience. And I also got the training on production audio gear, which before I mostly just used cassette recorders and whatnot at home. So I had formal training that way. So really it just kind of came about by that chance, taking that chance on myself of calling and say, I don't have any big formal experience to speak of, but if you have a way to plug me in, I will be a very hard worker. And they said yes. And it just took off from there.
And congratulations, because the thing is, this is what I wanted to do for the podcast is to bring my conversations after 9 years of transcribing them to my audience.
Oh, yes. Congratulations. Well done you to expand upon that and step into what you want to do.
And we're almost up to episode 100. So
are you really? That's fantastic, Jacob.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Now, before we go any further, we got to talk about the Grammys, because I'm a huge music person. And when it comes to anybody that says Recording Academy voting member, I want to immediately say, okay, I'll pry, but I don't want to get them in trouble. So on Sunday, March 14th, the Recording Academy will hold the 63rd Annual Grammy Awards. So as a voting member, what goes through your mind as you prepare to make your mark, to vote on the ballot?
I I really take their rules seriously. So first and foremost, as you may know, one of the things the Academy drills into us as members, voting members, is that we vote on the merit of the music. That we don't vote based on, oh, I did a project with that person 5 years ago, so I should definitely give them my vote no matter what, no matter how the music sucks or is wonderful, you know. So they encourage us not to look at our allegiances or business partnerships. Not to look at who else is on our label, not to look on, any of those business connections or friendships, but to purely vote based on what we hear. And my first few years, that was an interesting thing because it seems very simple and straightforward, but it is quite easy to encounter those conflicts of interest where you have to go, if I weren't affiliated in any shape or form with this other artist, would I vote for this music? That's kind of the litmus test you have to give yourself. And there were times where, I saw somebody's name on the ballot, and even though I have no personal connection or affiliation with them, I've just always loved their work. And so I immediately wanted to vote for them, but I would pause and I would go, wait, go listen to what this actually is. Don't vote on what they had 5 years ago. Listen to this particular music video, this particular single. And sometimes after I heard that new single, I would have to go, I can't vote for that.
It's definitely tough because I would imagine getting I get through emails a lot of times from campaigns from Interscope or even from UMG or even Epic, and I'm like, okay, if I'm not a recording, I'm not a voter, just to be transparent with everybody. I'm not a voter. I don't have any affiliation with the Recording Academy, but but there are some people that have been on the webs, some guests I had on the blog that's from Interscope and from Epic, and they're really incredible artists. So that's out of the way. But however, I would if you guys have 3 dozen emails a day from all these from not just the record companies, but also the CAAs, all the artist agencies as well.
Yes, and you're so right. And even not being a voting member, you can see some of the amount of those messages we get. We get inundated. If you attend any Grammy events at all over time, which of course you want to as an artist that can be on the ballot yourself, and also just as a voter to hear what's on the ballot and get familiar with those artists in person as well as just in their material, then you do receive their CDs, USB flash drives with their music, links, lots of emails. In fact, many of us in the Academy will create separate email addresses for the Grammy season every year. Not even one that's there all the time, but each year we have a distinct different email we use because we get so inundated. We have to put it off in a separate space and not just a folder in your inbox, but a totally different email address. And I've had to at times this year, this is the first year I've done it, but this year I finally hired an assistant to look through those emails for me because there were just so many. And I had her compile a spreadsheet for me of all the listen links they sent, the categories that they referenced. But part of that is also, I feel, my due diligence, because I don't want to miss an email. If one person, like you say, you get so many from Interscope and some of the labels, if one person has the monetary marketing budget to email me 30 times, but this really worthy indie artist only has my email once and is only, bold enough to email me once, I want them to have equal measure in my list of considerations. So to me, that's a big piece too, is that I look at big label artists and indie artists equally. And if, I only have 5 slots in a category and I have 6 people I want there, then I'm going to eliminate the big label artist and put in the indie name because I want to give them their best chance to make it to the nomination phase. So I am very thoughtful about all of that.
Yeah, and it's I totally get it, especially with all the stuff going on with the weekend, with fans being mad about the Weeknd not getting nominated, yeah. And then also years ago when Esperanza Spalding beat Justin Bieber, and the fans were really not happy with that, and then also Christina will be beating Britney. So there's been a lot of. It's very interesting to hear all these insights.
Yeah. And more and more, a lot of that can also come down to the screening committees. As you may know, there are the 2 rounds of voting. And when we select the top 5, or in some of the general fields, top 8 artists or projects that we think should be nominated, what the Academy typically does in many of the categories, not all, but some of the more popular ones especially, they will have a screening committee that looks at the top 20 people that made it through based on the members' votes. And then they, as a committee of experts in that particular genre, will decide who makes it to the top 5. So even if we do put in, Esperanza, or we do put in Justin Bieber, or, any other number of names, there are certainly lots of big label projects I have supported too. I voted for Ed Sheeran, because I really thought his project was worth it that year. And many other big label artists like that. But ultimately, even if we vote for them, if they get to the screening committee and for whatever reason, and I don't know what criteria they use once it gets in that private circle, I've never served on one of those committees yet. But, they can, even if somebody was technically in the top 5, move them out of the top 5 and move up somebody else that in their estimation, they feel might not have gotten the same marketing dollars, that, they recognize might not have had the radio airplay, but is doing really, really well on streaming platforms. I imagine those are the kinds of things they look at, that voters might simply not have known as much about them to elevate them. But if they feel like it's a really standout project that year, they have that power independent of the voters. Not that those people aren't also voters, but it is a different set of people, a smaller set of people that can also refine that list.
And thank you so much for sharing this, because I always find it fascinating, because I've covered the Grammys for years, and that's always been the dream of mine, is like, hopefully after COVID and after the vaccine, I would love to be on that red carpet with interviewing the recording artists.
Yeah, and it's, a wonderful time of year. I tell you, no matter where you are in the music industry, whether you're a journalist or you're a creative yourself and you're part of the machine in some fashion, some of the collaborators that I'm working with on these new albums are contacts that I made through the Grammys. My current producer, that string player, Andrew Jocelyn, my producer, Robert Eibach. So a lot of those connections are fruitfully made during that time. So whether I ever get a chance to vote for their work, or just pull them into my projects, it's so meaningful to be there and to get to know them personally.
All right, so we got to start winding down our conversation. So here are some last 2 questions. What are some of your favorite social media outlets? Like, I see that you have a presence on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And then, are there anybody else? And then, why do they stand out?
I kind of have a seat at the table on all of them. I do technically have a TikTok. I do technically have a Snapchat. I'm not on those platforms as much myself. I love photography, so I love Instagram. I love to put my travel photos there. You'll see a lot more of like the landscapes of places that I traveled in my face. I don't feel like people need to see my selfies all the time. But I am on Twitter probably the most, as you've probably noticed, because I keep up with the news a lot. I have a degree in international relations and studied a lot of political science and economics. I studied in London. So I follow a lot of the current events, and I like to kind of curate that news, because a lot of people that follow me are into some of those same things and are activists, or, really being advocates for people who don't have the voice that they should in public politics. So I'm always trying to elevate and boost those voices. I do a lot of retweeting of Bernice King and Ava DuVernay and a lot of people that are known, but that I just like to give a wider audience to. And that doesn't depend, it's not at all dependent on skin color or even necessarily political leaning. I've boosted people kind of from all backgrounds. So I really work there to try to give voice to other people. I do use it as an avenue, of course, also to update people on my music. So I do kind of point people to Twitter first and foremost, but I love Instagram. On Twitter, I'm at twitter.com/Natalie Nicole. At Instagram, I'm instagram.com/NNG music, my initials plus music. And you can find me on Facebook as well. I'm there a lot less these days just because of everything going on that platform. But I know a lot of people still kind of go there for some of their news and updates as well.
I totally agree. I still use all 3 of them. And also, I'll make sure to follow you after this. So.
Thank you.
You follow me back on mine?
Oh, absolutely. I already followed you back on Twitter. Love it.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. Also, sometimes we have a lot of aspiring singer-songwriters who want to advance their careers on Listen to This podcast. So if you have the opportunity to meet with some of them, and they want to advance their careers in the recording industry, what advice would you share with them?
My top piece of advice that's really been central to my career, and I'm a little biased about this, but my number one piece of advice would be to retain as much control of your art as you can. For me, that's been central. And I completely get that some people, their number one dream is to be on the big label. I've never pursued that. For some people, that's where they want to be, and that's the right fit for them. But at all points of that, even if you are with a big label, even if you have a huge management team and you're kind of delegating a lot of the micromanagement of your career and your social media and whatnot to other people, I just say, in your contracts and your conversations with them, always remind them that you are central to what you're creating, and you want to be involved, that you want to retain that artistic license and control, because if you don't, it will be kind of whittled away at and usurped from you very easily. I'm sure, you've probably heard so many of those horror stories where people signed away the rights to their masters because they didn't know better, or at the time they didn't think that there was going to be much value to them. And then 10 to 20 years later, they're going through the courts, $1 million court battles trying to get some of those rights back. So that would kind of be my first thing, whether it's, you're negotiating it on your own or you're speaking to entertainment lawyers, especially in this virtual age. No matter where you're based, you can find somebody who is an expert who can walk you through what those contractual things mean and help you make good decisions.
Awesome. Now, where can my audience, I know you talked about social media, but where can my audience get your music?
I always love it when people find me on Spotify, because I love to be in your playlist. I love for you to follow me there so you can get the updates when I have new releases come out. But you can also find me on Apple Music and Amazon, all the big digital providers, Tidal, Napster, all of those where you can download or stream. I do have physical albums available of Warm Winter. Those are available via Bandcamp. And I do have a few of my older albums that are now out of print becoming available there too. We just re-released one that I had released in 2008 of my original music that's there for people that want to find that. It's not prominent, but if you go looking for it, you can find it. And that one is another good one for anybody that might be an aspiring artist. Bandcamp is a great site that lets you release on your own terms. They even have, during the pandemic, on Fridays, the first Friday, I think, of every month, they take no percentage of what you sell on that day, just to kind of give back to the music community. So if you are looking for a distributor, that's a good place to start, where you have so much control over your music.
Those are really great places of advice. So guys, if you miss an episode of the Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar podcast, the audio editions, head to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Spreaker. Just type in Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar, JACOBELYACHAR, and in podcast. We had incredible conversations, and you guys should check that out. And also, I'm on social media as well. Please subscribe to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Once again, it's Jacob Elyachar, JACOBELYACHAR. And then come visit the blog that started it all. It's the 10-year of 2021 is my 10-year anniversary, Natalie. So thank you so much for being part of the 10-year anniversary celebration.
My pleasure. So grateful to be on your show, Jacob. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And more articles, interviews, and all that stuff on jakes.shake.com. And Natalie, thank you so much for taking time on your schedule to talk with me. I really enjoyed our conversation, especially talking about your album and also the recording accounting process. It was probably I hope that my audience find it fascinating as I did.
Thank you so much.
And then guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, have